All right. Welcome to the sideboard. My name's Eric, and we've got a really good show for you today. And if you like any of the decks, you can find those in the description box below. Also, while you're down there, go ahead and check out the rest of the channel. If you like some of the other content, I highly recommend going ahead and subscribing. We've got a lot more to come. So let's go ahead and talk about the current state of Standard. Like just this week alone, we had three GPs. We had Atlanta, Warsaw, and Shanghai. Now, out of those three GPs, the top 8 deck list, we get 24 decks. And the makeup of those was 14 energy decks. 14 out of 24 decks actually used energy. So that's a little over half, guys. Now, out of those 14 energy decks, 7 of them were 4-color energy. 4 of them were just, the stock energy builds, minus 2 or 3 cards, difference for the utility slots. And then we had 1 Sultai energy, 1 blue-green energy, and 1 Grixis energy. Yes, that's right, Grixis energy. And then the rest of the list was, made up of, 6 copies of Ramunap Red, one of which was a nice new take on red. They're calling it Desert Red, and it really stretches the mono red land base, believe it or not. And we'll take a look at those that deck today, along with the other few variants and few new decks we did get to see. Pretty much everything else was kind of what we've grown used to here in Ixalan. Just, more energy, more energy, more energy, and then those powerful artifact decks kind of sliding in. So we will actually start everything off with looking at the top deck list for each of the events, and then just kind of rolling into the other decks from there. So let's go ahead and pull up the first place deck list here for GP Atlanta. Now, this particular deck list is nice. I'm really happy that we have a first place deck that has no energy in it whatsoever. So, this is kind of where control players have been wanting to go anyway. I'm glad somebody's finally put it into a good build, showed us that you could win with this deck. So I expect to see a lot of people just really excited about this Esper approach deck. And when you get to looking at the deck, what the deck does here is it's taken your traditional blue-white approach deck that we've all grown, very used to. Approach of the Second Sons and its, game win percentage, that is still there. Now, Guillermo Matanon showed us that splashing red for Harness Lightning was a really good choice. And here they've actually went black for Fatal Push in the main board. The only black card in the main board. However, it works really good for them as it gives them a very nice transitional sideboard so that they can actually change into a completely different deck in the sideboard, and that's where things kind of get interesting with this one. I mean, this deck is really sweet, and I like the way that control has developed here. As you have your main board, settle the wreckage, fumigates, that sort of thing, everything you would expect out of an approach deck. But in the sideboard here, we've got some more Torrential Gearhulks, a couple copies of the Scarab God, pull from tomorrow to help refill the hand. They still have the 4 Regal Caracals that everyone has kind of really grown used to in the approach decks, because there are certain matchups where this is going to be what you want to do. But this allows him to really shift into 3 different decks depending on if he needs to, be a little bit more mid-range, if he wants to be true control, or maintain that kind of control combo finish with the approach. So this deck really gives you a lot of angles to attack the meta at. I like it. I like that it won first place, so I expect a lot of people to actually play it. And from that, hopefully we'll get some more refining out of it, and maybe this is a very good control answer to the meta. And if that is the case, I'm happy about that, considering A lot of us have been wanting Esper Control to come back for quite some time now. And it's a really good list. I like it. And it did take down first place in Atlanta. So let's go ahead and take a look at GP Shanghai and the winning deck list from there. No surprise here, right, guys? Teamer Energy. So Teamer Energy took down GP Shanghai, and this is a stock Teamer build. I don't really know anything else to call it but stock at this point. Like, this is your stock build. 4 Glory Bringers, 3 Hydras. The only thing that looks a little different about this deck from any other deck is a main board negate over the main board essence scatter. Now, I actually heard a few podcasts about some guys talking about this, and they were talking about that now that they've added a second abrade back to their copies of Teamer Energy, they're finding that they can deal with the creatures a little bit better on the average. So negate has kind of met that spot to be able to deal with whatever that one thing you don't want to deal with is. And most time, just having a main board answer to a board wipe or something like that can really just lock up a game for you. So Teamer Energy, uh, main board negate being the only real change to the deck. And then looking at the sideboard, we've kind of just got a plethora of different things that we've kind of come used to seeing in Teamer Energy. Some Torrential Gear Hulks are really good for flashing things back. River's Rebuke, which just absolutely just destroys the board stalls that you reach when you're in the mirror matches and things of that nature. Lifecrafter's Bestiary to help draw some cards. Another copy of Chandra. Appetite for the Unnatural, something that we've seen a lot of here lately, and with the rise of these enchantment decks, it just makes sense. And then we'll even see the third copy of Abrade, because God Pharaoh's Gift is a real threat, and there were some God Pharaoh's Gift decks that did show up this week. But we're not going to cover those because it's pretty much the same thing that we have seen from God Pharaoh's Gift. Other than that, not a lot has changed. I do notice that there's just no copies of Essence Scatter whatsoever in this deck, and that's just how he ran it. So that's Tamer Energy. That won Shanghai. Let's go ahead and look at the winner of Warsaw. Now, this one is 4-color energy. Now, I know 4-color energy, Teamer Energy, what's the difference? There's not a whole lot of difference. However, there's a few. Um, Main thing here, that it pulled up commit, not commit to memory. The main thing here is Scarab God Varaska being in the board. The only real reason for these decks to splash into black at all is for the Scarab God, and just that additional win con that can completely take over the game is kind of the whole reason for being in black. And then with more and more white decks actually coming up in the meta, and you're seeing more cast outs and Ixalan's bindings, it only made sense that since they were already in black that they went ahead and splashed that Varaska in there as well. Now, looking at the sideboard, you don't see any other black cards in the deck. So you'll see we have some Nissas here. Now, this was one that we first seen out of Seth Mansfield in U.S. Nationals, and he was running this Nissa in the sideboard, and it worked really well for him there. And then we have another copy, actually the only copy of Confiscation Coup, Chandra, Deathgorge Scavenger. We don't normally see this in the energy decks, but other than the Sultai energy decks, but yet here it is, and it definitely worked for him because he won Warsaw with it. Now, he does have a copy of Essence Scatter, and as far as his utility spells in the main board go, he, instead of running the Confiscation Coups, he went with a Commit to Memory. He does run 3 Abrades and 2 Magma Sprays. Now, another thing you might notice about this deck is the fact that there are only 2 Long Tusk Cub in the deck. He actually is built more on spending his energy for Whirler Virtuosos and Hydra triggers, but he does still have that opening of turn 2 Long Tusk Cub, if that is a thing. However, This deck is built a little bit more for the long game and the small chip damage, the attrition game. So definitely, you know, Teamer Energy. So our top three decks were Teamer Energy, Four Color Energy, and Esper Approach. So that's 66% there on the energy decks in the top three. Let's go ahead and take a look at a deck that I just wanted to pull out because we're talking about energy anyway. I just wanted to pull out Yuya Watanabe's deck because he's a big fan, or I'm a big fan of Yuya, and he ran virtually the same thing. However, he did keep in his confiscation coups, and he doesn't run a Glorybringer. Now, Yuya also had no counters whatsoever in the main board, none. And then, but he did have the Abrades. In the sideboard, he does have three counters, but if you'll notice, Yuya was running four copies of Vizier of Many Faces. One here in the main board, three more in the sideboard. Now, that is definitely some attrition. Okay, I'll point to it. Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh. Guys, he had a copy of Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh in his deck. I guess if you're already splashing for the black and you're wanting something to really go into that late game, why not? Nicol Bolas just absolutely having the power to end games, take over games, you know, catch you up from being behind by exiling your opponent's hand, things of that nature. We'll see that he has cards like Treasure Map and Search for Azcanta in his sideboard, along with a copy of Nissa. I mean, she can't be left out here. A lot of people are wanting to put this Nissa in their sideboard, and I can't blame them. She works really, really well in these decks. But Yuya actually brought us some really nice tech here with his Nicol Bolas, and it's not the first time we've seen Nicol Bolas in the side, but I was a little surprised to see four copies of Vizier of Many Faces. So maybe if there are certain matchups that Yuya is putting that much emphasis on Vizier, maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention to Vizier of Many Faces. All right, so let's go ahead and look at what Sultai Energy is doing in the meta right now. Sultai Energy, pretty straightforward. You've got two versions of the deck. One runs Hostage Taker, one runs Hydra. That's pretty much it. There's not a lot of changes. Some of them have some variations in between the two, but for the most part, not a lot has changed with Sultai Energy since Seth Mansfield won the Pro Tour with it. The deck is extremely solid. It's performing really well, and we're seeing versions of that deck within 2 to 3 cards pop up in the top 16 and 32 of tournaments everywhere. So let's go ahead and take a look at the current Raminot Red deck. Now, normally we get 4 copies of Hazret the Fervent, and that's kind of where the deck tops out. Now, this week we actually got a new version of Red. Now, granted, in a monocolored deck, there's not a lot of changes you can do to Red deck to make it, individualized, but we do have this new version here. Now, this is called Desert Red. And let's go ahead and look at those deserts. We got some Dunes of the Dead. So whenever this desert is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, create a 2/2 black zombie. Okay, so a couple extra bodies for red deck. We'll go on down. Raminot Red, absolutely, of course. You have to expect Raminot. 2 Scavenger Grounds and 3 Scorched Deserts. So altogether, we're having, let's see, 9, 10, 11, 12 deserts. So this is virtually a 2-color deck as far, if you'll consider, these being your split lands of colorless and red, and, these others being your colorless lands. It's running red deck as if it was a 2-color deck. Nothing wrong with that. However, the deck's a little bit different from what we're used to seeing. Yes, we've still got Shock, Soulscar Mage, Bomat Courier, but we don't normally see a lot of Magma Spray. Magma Spray is one of those cards that if you end up against a deck like, let's say, Approach, and has no mainboard creatures, and you have no way to target anything, you can get stuck with these cards in your hand, and if you get multiples of them, a lot of times it could cost you maybe a 5-point swing with Hazard or something. And then we see a Braid. The exact same scenario can apply to a Braid. So here we have 2 copies of Magma Spray and 3 copies of a Braid, which could easily get stuck in your hand. Also, we have some treasure maps, and let's take a look at the 4 drops. I just want to go ahead and talk about it. There's only one main board copy of Hazard in this deck. He's actually running Sand Strangler. I don't know why, but 1 Hazard, 3 Sand Stranglers, main board. Then 3 Chandras and 3 Glorybringers. Now, because he's only running 1 Hazard, this deck, which runs 25 lands by the way, has no problem just going ahead and casting. And from the one I seen this weekend, this deck had a lot of attrition value. It could really go into the late game with no problem because it was more or less set to do so. Another thing I would like to point out in this deck is there is no Earthshaker Kenra. So with no Earthshaker Kenra and very few Hazards in the main board, it's definitely a different take on Ramunap Red. Let's go look at the sideboard and see where it's going from there. I mean, honestly, I would almost call this Big Red, considering it has so many cards at 4 mana or above. Looking at the sideboard, we've got some more cuts. I don't know how he's going to cast Ribbons. He can only cast Ribbons off of treasures. Wow, okay. So he's got Cut the Ribbons in the sideboard. Chandra's Defeat, more copies of Magma Spray, the additional Soulscar Mage, which is actually really good against, like, Ronus and other Hazards and things of that nature. A Braid to, deal with artifacts. A couple copies of Cut. The 4th, Rampaging Ferocidon. And here we see the additional Hazards. Now, he does have the ability to reduce his curve, get faster by adding, another Soulscar Mage, more Rampaging Ferocidon, and a couple more Hazards to kind of get the curve back down and have that red deck feel that we've all kind of grown used to. Also, you'll see 2 copies of Release the Gremlins here. Now, the only time I actually seen this card cast this weekend was he actually cast Release the Gremlins on his own tokens and made 3 Gremlins. So that's pretty cool. I mean, if you're having treasure map and you can make some treasures, I just kind of expected to see Captain Lannery Storm in the deck, but the deck did top 8, so didn't need Lannery Storm. Alright, so we've talked about energy, we've talked about red deck. Now let's talk about a couple new forms of energy that kind of hit us this weekend. And the first one is going to be this blue-green pummeler deck. Now, this isn't new. We covered it on the Fringe here a couple weeks back, but the deck has showed up again. And because of all of the hype and the current state of most people being a little upset about energy, I really wanted to showcase that there are different strategies that you can put into the energy shell. And just because, yes, it is an energy shell, that doesn't mean that it's the god-awful Call Blade scenario where everyone is playing the exact same deck. Yeah, it can feel that way when everyone's casting turn 1 Attune and turn 2 Servant or Lone Tusk Cub. However, most of the time you're looking at different versions of the deck, unless you're just running into a meta full of Teamer. Now, looking at this deck, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, but the overall idea of the deck is it's an electrostatic pummeler deck. Now, it uses its energy, and its big payoffs are Electrostatic Pummeler and Bristling Hydra. And what it does with those cards is it puts a Cartouche of Knowledge or a One with the Wind on them, draws cards, puts them up in the air, so now that these creatures have evasion, and then it can use its many pump tactics, whether it's, Hash Up Oasis, which it runs a full four of, by the way, Larger Than Life, which it also runs a full four of, Ronus, even being able to, pay 3 mana to +2 the pummeler to give you a nice little start on the pummeler. You can pump with Blossoming Defense, all of which it only takes a few activations of pummeler to put your opponent at 0 life. So Pummeler, just a really good little aggro deck that kind of has that combo feel to it. That combo finish. I would say if you thought that Approach had a combo feel finish to a control deck, then this is a combo finish to an aggro deck, and it's got a lot of fun. You're just gonna hit these creatures that you can really protect and just get completely over the lines for one good hit that just finishes the game. And that's always a lot of fun, especially if you're a Timmy and you like to slam big dudes and just hit people. Well, Hydra is awesome for that. So let's take a look at the sideboard here. The sideboard's mainly blue. However, we're going to see a couple black cards and a swamp here. Now, because he's got a tune with Aether and he's got Aether Hub, this splash is doable, and those are mainly just for another Hydra deck, so that he can make them sacrifice those Hydras or make them sacrifice, say, a Hazoret or something of that nature. But the +1/+1 and lifelink is absolutely phenomenal. If he's against another deck and he just needs to gain life, the splash of black is exactly what it was looking for. I actually would kind of expect to see this card start showing up in some of the Sultai decks. That being said, the rest of the deck is kind of what you would expect. A couple Aether Sphere Harvesters, Confiscation Coup to deal with opposing Scarab Gods or something like that. Greenbelt Rampagers, little out there as far as cards that you would expect to see in the sideboard, but it just needs another good body to put down so that it can get that out there early. If you can get down a turn 1 attune, turn 2 Greenbelt Rampager, and then turn 3 you can put this bad boy in the air and you're swinging for 5. That's not very bad. So Greenbelt Rampager, I definitely see that. It's not a bad card at all. And I mean, if you had a Blossoming Defense, let's say they went to kill it as you were equipping it, and you can Blossoming Defense it, you're swinging for 7 on turn 3. That's with a Greenbelt Rampage. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Alright guys, so let's take a look at Mardu vehicles. Now, we did see this deck in the top 8 of the Pro Tour, and this is pretty much the same deck. The deck hasn't changed a lot. Mardu vehicles just kind of Heart of Kirin's, Aether Sphere Harvesters, Unlicensed Disintegration. It's crewing those with Scrap Heap Scroungers, Toolcraft Exemplars. I've found it really interesting that Inventor's Apprentice has been making its way into these decks. I personally just kind of expected that maybe Soulscar Mage might be a little bit better, especially when you look at the sideboard and see just the sheer veracity of spells they have that could actually trigger it. Another one that I really wanted to point out that is starting to be in these Mardu vehicle decks that we weren't really used to in the past was these Dusk Till Dawns. Now, Dusk Till Dawn gives them a way to deal with those bigger creatures. This card has not always been run in your Mardu vehicles decks in the past. However, now it's really necessary to help them fight against decks like Temur Energy. And if you are playing Temur Energy and you come across one of these Mardu vehicle decks, one of your best strategies is going to be like a Whirler or Virtuoso strategy, so that you can stay low to the ground so they can't really get a lot of value off the Dusk portion. You're not going to be able to do much about the Dawn portion without a counter spell or something like that, but you don't want to just give them too much out of your Hydras and your Glory Bringers and things of that nature. So that's your Mardu vehicles deck. This deck's not overly complicated. It's just some good value creatures. It's very um, it's very linear on what you want to do with the deck as far as it being aggro. You want to get a good early finisher out. You want to get your Heart of Kirin out as quickly as possible, and then you just kind of want to dump the hand to kind of get in there with Hazard. And the kid who took it to, I think it was third place in the Pro Tour, maybe it was fourth place. He said that it's not necessarily a Hazard deck. That Hazard actually digs you out of things. However, it is kind of a Hazard deck. The deck is extremely cheap and low to the ground as far as your curve goes, so you can dump your hand really fast and then get to Hazard and kind of finish out from there. You have some answers that most Hazard decks do not have, especially in probably the best instant speed kill spell available right now, as far as an absolute kill. Fatal Push is still like not in the category with Fatal Push, guys. Kind of comparing this to Murder and any of the others. Instant speed, just flat kill. This is amazing. Now, a lot of people don't have red, a lot of people don't have artifacts, so Vraska's Contempt at 4 is what most of us have to settle for. But this deck gets to run Unlicensed Disintegration to max value. So, more power to the deck for that, as it gives it a lot of answers to help deal with opposing vehicles and things of that nature. Also, it always has to be mentioned that that 3 damage coming off of it can be redirected to a Planeswalker, so deck's got a lot going for it. It's easy for the deck to get into the air with its Heart of Kirins, things of that nature. Walking Ballistas, setting back, pumping up, things of that nature. Really good deck. I like the deck, and I actually may even put out a league here with this one very soon. Okay, so last but not least, I hope some of you are still around for this. I mentioned it earlier. We were talking about a Grixis Energy Deck. Now, uh, Craig Wesco uh, showed us a blue-red Artificers deck, Nicodles for Life. He showed us the blue-red Artificers deck when he went 5-0 with it just before the PT. Now, this is really close to that, but it's also really close to an old combo that a lot of people were trying back in Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. The combo being Decoction Module. If you can have up to 3 copies of this on the battlefield, then you can go infinite with Whirler Virtuoso. That's possible. Yeah, you can have that happen. But what more or less happens is you just use this as a true value card. Now, if you had like Panharmonicon or something like that in the deck, then Panharmonicon would just allow you only need 2 copies of it out, and then you could actually net an energy, go infinite Thopters, infinite energy all at once. Now, that's an idea. Yeah, you can do that, but he didn't. He just went with flat out the 4 decoction modules, just using that as a nice little hedge to help add some more energy to his deck. Now, another little part of decoction module that a lot of people don't pay attention to is return target creature you control to its owner's hand. Now, when you are casting things like Maverick Thopterus and things of that nature for, you know, 2 mana, then at the end of your opponent's turn, just returning your Maverick Thopterus to your hand and then recasting that the very next turn, or sometimes even on the same turn, create 4 Thopters and Maverick Thopterus, just right there. A lot of value, guys. Plus, that many Thopters entering the battlefield, all triggering decoction module, giving you that much more energy, especially if you've got multiple decoction modules down. It gets extremely out of hand, extremely fast. Then all of a sudden, if you land a Whirler or Virtuoso, you have an army in a can. Go. A lot of fun. Another deck that I can't wait to run. We've got a lot out of these 3 GPs that gave us a lot to play with. I did play the blue red Artificers deck a little bit from Greg Wesco, And that deck was extremely powerful. I had a lot of fun with it. I only played it in the queues, so I didn't actually get into any leagues with it. But that deck was a lot of fun, and it used a lot of these same cards. So I highly expect that we can get something along those lines out of this. And it did top 8. So your most different version of energy, but I promise you, without the energy mechanic, this deck would not work. And a lot of people talk about Whirler Virtuoso as being one of those parasitic parts of energy that they don't like having in Teamer Energy. Well, there's an entire another strategy using Whirler Virtuoso that was able to top. So maybe energy is not as bad as everyone thought. We just kind of need to embrace it. Remember, in Magic, we always want to maximize the usage of resources, and energy is just another resource that we can use. So, maximize that use and start throwing some new builds into your energy package, into the energy shell. Play around with it a little bit. Those brewers out there, if you're listening, please just brew with energy for a little bit. Feel like most of the shell is extremely cheap. You can get attunes cheap. You can get servants cheap, things of that nature. You don't have to stick you know those just hate cards in there for those people that just want to play and have some fun with Magic. You can actually get a lot of your consistency out of adding energy to your deck to help stabilize your deck, and possibly even giving a strategy that no one's really seen yet the opportunity to come forth and shine. So build with energy. Let's play with energy. Let's accept that energy is half of our meta. Now, we've got some different variants of that, but energy is half of our meta. So, with that being said, guys, this week is sure to be a lot of fun going forward from here. Keep your enchantment hate, keep your artifact hate. Don't forget about the Scarab God. Don't forget about Hazard. And don't forget about Approach of the Second Sun. Maintain, a good answer for those cards, and maintain good artifact and enchantment hate, and you should be okay this week going forward. I've had a lot of fun. I hope you had a lot of fun. We'll see you next time here on the sideboard.